A virus known as the rich man's plague has swept across the globe, branding wealth, a title everyone desires, with the mark of death. This virus is highly selective, striking precisely at the elite. First the billionaires on the Forbes list, then local oil tycoons, and finally bankers and entrepreneurs. Those infected all share one distinct symptom: their teeth emit a glowing white light. If they fail to rid themselves of their fortune, the only outcome is death. The virus first emerged at an auction, where Laura, a renowned entrepreneur owning 9 companies, attended with the confidence and resources to bid. Her target was a painting offered by a member of the local royal family, depicting the infamous 1816 shipwreck of the Medusa, a tragedy in which inadequate rescue efforts and too few lifeboats led to the deaths of all passengers aboard. The painting's heavy historical story caused its value to soar rapidly, rising from an initial $50,000 to over $1 million. Driven by guilt, Laura was determined to win the bid. During the auction, her daughter called, and she split her attention between the conversation and the escalating bids. Round after round, the price climbed from $50,000 to beyond $1 million, until Laura finally secured the painting for $2 million. After obtaining it, she excitedly shared the news with her daughter, but then froze in place. She had just noticed someone in the auction hall whose teeth shimmered with a dazzling white glow, something no normal person should have. Suddenly, gasps erupted from the other side of the hall. Following the commotion, Laura pushed through the crowd and was shocked to see the royal family member who had donated the painting lying on the floor, convulsing, and ultimately taking his last breath in front of everyone. This royal family member was not the only one to die under strange circumstances. Across the world, many wealthy individuals began to suffer sudden deaths or mysterious disappearances, all of them without exception possessing immense fortunes. The news reported these incidents in detail, and with so many magnates gone, their companies faced varying degrees of turmoil, triggering economic decline and the threat of a looming global financial crisis. Many politicians and historians speculated that this might be a coordinated extermination targeting the rich, possibly orchestrated by terrorist organizations. However, others disagreed, arguing it was more likely a virus that exclusively afflicted the elite, since no one had ever actually seen terrorists attack these magnates, nor had there been any evidence of such groups profiting from the chaos. After the deaths of these magnates, their wealth did not flow into terrorist accounts, nor did any armed groups suddenly become rich. As the news spread, more and more people began to recognize the existence of the virus. When Laura's assistant came to pick her up, he wore a mask as a precaution. From the information available, they learned that the most obvious symptom of infection was teeth turning pale and glowing with a ghostly white light, an unnatural radiance like the Grim Reaper himself, signaling certain death. The assistant brought Laura to the room of a former business partner, where she met the son of a billionaire. The young man was baffled as to why his father had squandered his fortune and dismissed his employees, believing that surrendering years of hard work because of an uncertain virus made no sense at all. Unwilling to live an ordinary life, he secretly transferred part of his father's assets into his own name. Even a fraction was enough to guarantee him a carefree future without worry for the rest of his life. Yet as he excitedly shared his plans with Laura, she stared at him in horror. His teeth had begun to emit that unhealthy white glow. Panic struck her as she realized she was witnessing the very moment of infection, from nothing to full onset, right before her eyes. Terrified, Laura rushed out of the room, forcing herself to stay calm as she instructed her assistant to book tickets out of the city. She wanted to get as far away from the virus as possible. But the assistant informed her that all flights had been grounded due to the outbreak. Determined to escape, Laura said she was willing to pay any price, insisting her assistant arrange a private jet, no matter the cost. Stepping out of the hall, Laura saw crowds of poor people outside holding rallies, cheering over the deaths of the wealthy. An invisible tension spread through the city like smoke. She hailed a cab to head home, and during the ride she was on the phone with her business partner discussing stock prices. The driver seemed to sense something and asked if Laura was rich. Realizing his suspicion, she quickly denied it, but her explanation did little to ease his wariness. He immediately put on a mask, his defensive posture plain to see. At that moment, Laura received devastating news. Her parent company had transferred all its shares into her name, instantly raising her net worth to 900 million. Under normal circumstances, such a windfall would have thrilled her, but with the virus looming, the sudden fortune made her feel nothing but a chilling dread. On her way home, she could almost hear the footsteps of death closing in. Laura rushed back, determined to disperse her fortune, believing it was the only way to escape the grip of the rich man's plague. She knew that keeping just enough money for survival while shedding the excess was the key to evading the Reaper's pursuit. So, while entrusting others to liquidate her wealth, she took some cash stored at home and prepared to reunite with her daughter. Before leaving, Laura carefully checked herself again, making sure she had not been infected. Her teeth still looked healthy. Just then, fully armed soldiers appeared at her door, claiming they had been sent by the government to protect society's elite, with Laura included on their list. Yet their presence gave her no sense of relief. Knowing the cruelty of the world, she realized that if she left with them, she would lose her freedom and become nothing more than a pawn in someone else's game of profit. So she told a lie, slipped past the soldiers' watchful eyes, and quietly escaped through the back door. The streets were filled with wealthy people fleeing the city, traffic completely paralyzed and roads hopelessly jammed. Fortunately, Laura's secretary had prepared a backup plan. At a flat clearing, she had arranged for a private jet. But she was not the only one with that idea. Many other magnates had gathered there, all desperate to escape by air. A single seat on the plane was as valuable as gold, and no matter how much money the rich offered or how much status they flaunted, the captain admitted passengers strictly in order, showing no favoritism. Securing a seat here meant securing a chance at survival, and so the wealthy abandoned their usual pride and dignity. In the chaos, one person even snatched a small dog from a lady tycoon's arms and hurled it away just to claim her spot. While waiting to board, Laura asked her secretary to transfer her assets into his name so that once the virus passed they could live together. She was doing this to keep her fortune from being taken by an ex-husband under a signed agreement, since who, having wealth, would willingly return to a life of poverty, but when presented with the document the secretary refused to sign. Knowing that no amount of money matters if you don't have your life, and convinced Laura understood that too, he turned and walked away without looking back. On the plane, Laura calmed herself and prepared to reunite with her daughter, yet she couldn't escape the harsh truth that the celebrities and wealthy people who used to bask in fame on television had now become vectors of the virus, and many wished them dead so the spoils could be divided among the rest. Just as the private jet prepared to leave the city, a man in the cabin suddenly showed his teeth glowing with an unhealthy white light. The shocking sight terrified the other wealthy passengers. One female tycoon, who had previously argued with him, demanded the captain throw him out, but the enraged man punched her in the nose, drawing blood. Fear quickly spread, and many of the other magnates lined up behind the woman, trying to force him out. Despite the captain repeatedly trying to restore order and shouting in anger, nothing worked. The man clung desperately to the cabin door, thousands of meters above the ground, determined to survive. The female tycoon continued her attacks, and a violent struggle ensued. In the end, another wealthy passenger kicked them both out, resulting in a fatality. The cabin fell completely silent as everyone waited in tense silence for the plane to land. Upon reaching their destination, Laura was met by her ex-husband Tony, who informed her that the virus had already spread to this area and that many violent mobs were attacking the wealthy. The entire city's police force had been mobilized to protect the elite, and all checkpoints were rigorously screening anyone coming in or out. When Laura was measured and confirmed uninfected, authorities began verifying her identity, leaving her deeply anxious about whether she could bluff her way through. Fortunately, a car suddenly barreled through, creating significant chaos, and Laura and Tony used the distraction to slip past the checkpoint. Meanwhile, on a luxury cruise ship, violent explosions occurred as many wealthy passengers began destroying their own properties to eliminate their fortunes. After driving through the night, the exhausted pair arrived at Laura's old village in the early hours of the next morning, where the villagers, startled by her sudden return, greeted her with extreme caution. Fortunately, Laura's daughter was still there, which brought her a sense of relief. However, an irreconcilable tension existed between Laura and her mother. Laura feared that if her daughter spent time with her mother, she might inherit her mother's harsh habits, Yet unexpectedly, her mother pointed out Laura's own flaws. She had long disapproved of Laura's behavior, especially because of a drowning incident near the Mediterranean, during which Laura had profited significantly. Her mother condemned this act of using others' lives to enrich oneself, suggesting that perhaps the virus was a form of retribution for the immoral actions of the wealthy. This also shed light on why, at the beginning of the story, Laura had spent $2 million to secure that painting. The conversation with her mother ended in disagreement and tension. In the village, Laura was isolated by the locals, with some even saying that the virus targeted billionaires, oil tycoons, and bankers. Any wealthy person couldn't escape, and that she would inevitably be infected. Sitting by her room's doorway, Laura reflected on her rise to wealth with a twinge of guilt. Tony comforted her, urging her not to dwell on it. At that moment, villagers informed her that the police had found the village and were checking everyone's personal information one by one. Despite lingering tensions, Laura's mother decided to stand by her daughter's side for her safety. The family prepared to leave together, packing overnight and boarding a fishing boat to escape by sea, with their destination set for Tanzania, where Laura's mother had a friend. However, the journey from their home to the destination spanned nearly 7,000 kilometers, and facing such an immense distance with no better alternatives, Laura had no choice but to accept it. Early the next morning, she awoke to see the sea filled with women and children fleeing in desperation. Tears welled in her eyes, blending with the fine rain on her face, yet her daughter seemed delighted, silently noting that this was the first time she had ever shared a rain shower with her grandmother. Later that evening, watching her mother eat sashimi alongside her, her daughter's joy continued, cherishing these small moments together. Along the journey, they rescued a young girl struggling to stay afloat on a wooden plank. Soon after, they encountered armed militants, and the dark barrels of their guns left Laura and the others too fearful to speak. Through gestures and broken communication, Laura realized they had entered Libya. Stripped of the power and influence her wealth and status once afforded her, even when she and Tony explained they would not stay long, the soldiers showed no mercy, taking the entire family into custody. By the following morning, after leaving behind Laura and the others' luggage, the soldiers forced them onto the northern coast of Africa. The island they arrived at had once served as a transit point for African migrants. From the inscriptions there, Laura realized it had been established by Italy to commemorate migrants who had gone missing at sea. Upon reaching the island, Laura and her family fell from their status as wealthy elites to ordinary citizens, ultimately becoming refugees. To survive, they had to rely on food distributed by charitable organizations. The sudden shift left them bewildered and unsure of what to do. It was the young girl they had rescued who bravely went forward to collect food, providing Laura and her family with their first means of sustenance. During the subsequent inspections, even though she had no fever and her teeth showed no signs of whitening, the little girl was still treated as an infected person and placed in isolation by the soldiers. Distracted by her own struggles, Laura could only watch helplessly as the child was treated as an illegal immigrant. Later, Laura approached the registration office, pleading with the police to help her family reach Europe, but the soldiers informed her that the island had already lost all contact with the mainland several days ago. Moreover, the relief facilities on the island could no longer operate. The stored food would only last for a few more days, after which the residents would have to fend for themselves. Here, Laura encountered a former business partner. She told the man that she had learned a cargo ship would depart the next day, but he warned her that the ship was reserved for locals, making it nearly impossible for outsiders to board. He added that even if they managed to leave, the outside world might not be any better than the island. The man advised Laura not to waste her efforts. Then, as he removed his mask, Laura saw that he had been infected with the virus, his teeth glowing unnaturally. She immediately kept her distance, staying close to her family. That evening, as Laura prepared to find a place to rest, she noticed something was wrong with Tony. It turned out that Tony had already signed the asset transfer agreement in his own name. Seeing her ex-husband go to such lengths for her, Laura felt a surge of guilt for the first time and shed tears for him once more. Knowing he was infected with the virus and facing certain death, Tony urged Laura to take good care of their daughter and start a new life in a safer place. During their final moments of conversation, they suddenly noticed several soldiers attempting to take their daughter, with intentions all too clear. To protect her, Laura and Tony fought desperately, channeling their raw emotions, and together managed to drive the two soldiers back. The cold wind blew open every tent, and they had lived there so long that the wound on Laura's leg from the soldiers' cut had already scarred over. In order to survive, Laura used her own hands to obtain the essentials for living, and together with the others, she built a boat capable of floating, hoping it could carry them off the island to a new place where they might survive. Dozens of people crowded onto the boat, drifting from day into night until they finally saw lights, and then a yacht heading straight toward them. Many waved their arms, hoping for rescue, but knowing how dangerous human nature could be, Laura immediately warned them to jump into the water to save themselves. Laura's instinct proved correct. The yacht did not stop to rescue anyone but instead ran straight over them. In the chaos, Laura and her daughter were separated, leaving Laura heartbroken and recalling the painting she had purchased and the people who had drowned in the Mediterranean accident. She drifted on the sea for an unknown length of time until villagers finally pulled her ashore. Upon waking and scanning the coast, she saw no sign of her daughter, and her alert instincts drove her to leave the village immediately. In an abandoned building, she encountered an elderly man who gave her local clothing and explained where displaced people like her typically gathered. Dressed in the local attire, Laura managed to avoid detection by armed militants. Afterwards, she quietly made her way to the refugee gathering point in search of her daughter, and finally seeing her brought Laura a sense of relief. Together with her daughter, she headed to the next gathering site. When the truck arrived, Laura and the others continued on foot toward their next destination. Along the way, they encountered a variety of people, some wary of them, some brandishing weapons to drive them away, and others who were kind-hearted, offering help and guidance. With the assistance of these benevolent individuals, Laura and her group faced no immediate danger. Relying on their own strength, they finally reached their intended location, where the residents were self-sufficient and outwardly exceptionally friendly, courteously welcoming Laura and her group. They were then taken to a makeshift shelter built from wood and leaves, where they could rest temporarily. After resting, Laura and the others were brought out and required to follow the rules of the place, which meant surrendering all personal belongings. This confirmed that the way to avoid the rich man's virus was to abandon wealth. As long as no one possessed money or everyone received the same items, they could escape the virus. Even though Laura cherished her first watch, bought with her own salary, she had no choice but to comply with the rules. Reluctantly placing the watch into the collection, she watched as the residents began distributing the items, each person taking one as a keepsake. When a woman took Laura's watch, it left her feeling deeply saddened. Facing the scattered items in the box, Laura felt somewhat distracted, but confronted with the gazes of others and the rules of the place, she picked one at random. From then on, they gradually integrated into this secluded haven, working the land alongside the others and earning their food through labor. Laura settled into a peaceful routine. Without any electronic devices, life resembled a primitive agrarian society, with everyone self-sufficient and spending their free time in leisure activities, reminiscing about the past. At night, all the residents would gather around the campfire, and this became their way of life for a period of time. Until the second exchange of belongings, a different stranger took her watch, and Laura still did not get it back. This time, however, she did not show any sign of frustration and simply took a grinding tool. Seemingly following a plan, she collected some beautiful seashells from the beach, brought them back to her dwelling, and quietly polished them with care. Outwardly, she appeared calm and untroubled, living a simple, peaceful life, but inwardly, Laura was quietly devising a plan to change the current situation. She worked diligently while watching her daughter live carefree and happy. After a long time, she had polished many beautiful seashells and then began waiting for the right moment. One evening after dinner, Laura took the polished seashells she had collected and quietly followed the woman who had taken her watch. When they were alone, Laura offered her seashells to the elderly woman. As the woman took them one by one, Laura suddenly clenched her fist and pointed to the watch on the woman's wrist, leaving her visibly shocked, as if she had just realized something. At that moment, Laura revealed a strange, knowing expression. Such an action would be normal anywhere else, but in this secluded haven, it was different. Because in the elderly woman's eyes, Laura was reintroducing the concept of money into the village. And with the idea of wealth reintroduced, the future of this community was inevitably set on a very different path.